Good evening. Welcome everyone to the Planning Commission, Housing Task Force and Zoning Commission joint meeting on Wednesday, February 18th, 2026 at 6 p.m. at Town Hall first floor conference room at 302 Main Street, Old Saybrook. Roll call, start with myself and we'll go around. Everybody can introduce themselves. Mark Caldarella, Chair of the Zoning Commission.
Mike Bender, Chair of the Planning Commission, Housing Task Force.
Laura Gray on the zoning commission.
John Henry, zoning commission.
Mike Kelly, zoning commission.
Robin Kelly, zoning commission.
Jennifer Donahue, Director of Economic Development.
Brian Curtis with Nathan Jacobs and Associates, Town Engineers.
Erin Tornio, Planning Commission.
Dennis Toolmary, Planning Commission.
Doug McCracken, Planning Commission.
Online.
Bob Friedman, Housing Task Force.
Gregory.
Everyone, Greg Benoit, WSP.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eliza Lopresti from Rivercog.
That's it, Chuck.
Chuck, do you hear us?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I've got a broken camera. Chuck Chadwick, Borough of Fenwick.
Welcome. Anybody else?
Sam Gold, River Cog.
Can you hear us, Sam?
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Maybe you stepped away.
Yeah, he has a couple issues with some of his earbuds, but Sam is stepping in for Megan Juflas tonight, who is ill. So he'll be presenting with me on the housing growth plans.
Great, thank you.
So I was gonna do the introductions, but I think we kind of already went through. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Tonight we have two presentations. One is the mixed use housing study, which is a study you're familiar with, of the B1, B2, and part of the B4 district in the Main Street train station area. And we're looking at current zoning regulations, parking and soils. So tonight, Greg is here from WSP to present. I don't know if we're waiting on Miranda, Greg, if you wanna.
Yeah, it looks like she's in as an attendee, just not as a panelist yet.
Oh, sorry. There.
There she is.
We also have Casey Hand from the zoning commission joining us.
Right.
So while we're waiting, this is a grant from the Department of Housing to study Main Street and WSP, and Brian Curtis from Nathan L. Jacobson are consultants on this, and they're here to present findings so far tonight. And this is one of our first outreach sessions, looking for comments for you, since obviously planning and zoning are a big part of this. I guess when Miranda and Greg are ready, I'll turn it over to you.
Sorry. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great.
Cool.
Little louder, Miranda, if possible.
Okay.
Turn it up.
If this is better,
Yes.
great. Okay, let me see. Share. I'm sharing my screen for the slides we prepared today. You will see a cover page for now.
Yep, it's all set.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. And thank you for the invitation for us to present our updates on the study. The project is for the Main Street Development Potential Analysis. I believe there was a early kickoff meeting. Most of you have attended. We had a project introduction, and today we're going to update on our progress. And for the agenda of the presentation, we will first provide you an update on the existing condition analysis. And then my colleague Greg Benoit will be covering that. And then I will go through the progress on our current status on identifying the priority sites. As part of that, the SIPTIC capacity review and analysis led by Brian is also in progress, and Brian will provide update there as well. After that, we will wrap up with the next steps and where we at to move on with the project. And before that, just want to bring everyone to an overview on the schedule or the work plan. Where are we today is marked in second half of February. And in general, we are wrapping up our task 1 on the existing condition analysis. We are in the middle of the process to confirm, reviewing, analyzing, and confirming the identification of potential opportunity sites. And after the task 2, wrapping up, when we identify the top 10 of the properties with highest potential, we will move on to the task 3, which is the test fit concept and recommendations in March. So from here, I will pass it to Greg first to cover the existing condition analysis.
Great. Thanks, Brenda. So just here at the beginning, we just wanted to take a few minutes to describe the upfront analysis that informed our first pass at identifying potential mixed-use development sites in the project area. So as you see here, we'll review the overall study area just as a reminder of what we're looking at in the town, parking conditions and key takeaways, a very brief regulatory overview, and a summary of the owner interviews that we conducted a month or 2 ago. Next slide, Miranda. So as you may recall, the study area for this project is centered upon the Main Street corridor, kind of from the US Route 1 Boston Post Road intersection south to the general proximity of Town Hall. So the majority of our project area consists of approximately 155 parcels, which were split into 70 different properties. It is primarily situated within the B1 zoning district, with smaller portions up at the northern end there, situated within the B2 and then a few in the B4 district. In later slides, we'll go into this a little bit further, but you all are very familiar with the regulations associated with these districts, so we won't spend a lot of time on that. Next slide, thank you. So within the study area, the first step we did was kind of taking a look at what the existing parking inventory is. So from that inventory, we identified just over 1,900 parking spaces, including approximately 1,600 off-street surface parking and about 300 on-street parking spaces, as you can see on the slide here. Blue is on-street parking, orange is off-street parking. So to kind of understand the existing conditions we're dealing with, our project team partnered with a vendor to conduct a sample parking occupancy count to kind of sample a typical weekday and weekend period in the town. Just because of the timing of the project, we did take these counts in early December. So the Thursday period was counted on December 4th. The weekend period was counted on Saturday, December 6th, which we noted here did occur during the Starlight Festival. So it may have been a little bit higher than you might typically expect for a winter period. So those are the days that were sampled for those periods. What you're seeing here is the parking counts that were conducted at 2-hour intervals beginning in the early morning or late morning through the evening. So during both the weekday and weekend periods, we observed the highest occupancy counts and utilization percentages at around the noontime project or noontime counts. About 43% utilization for all parking spaces for the weekday and about 38% on the weekend. So the table on the bottom here is showing total counts for each period for on-street, off-street, and total. And then the total occupancy obviously split between Thursday and Saturday period. Next slide, Miranda. So again, given the timing of this project, we did recognize that performing counts in December is probably not kind of reflective of peak occupancy periods along this corridor. We understand that activity in Old Saybrook typically peaks in the summer months, given the strong tourist demand. and recreational activities. So what we did to kind of address that is we performed a seasonality adjustment to account for these expected kind of fluctuations in the occupancy levels. So that process was twofold. So to account for an increase in just overall traffic patterns, and thus by extension, higher parking demand. We took a look at Condot traffic counts for a count station that was located at the north end of the area, I believe just south of the intersection with Boston Post Road, comparing the most recent winter count to the most recent summer count and just kind of figuring out what the increase in traffic levels were, which came out to be approximately 25%. So 25% increase from the winter to the summer months. So kind of coinciding with that, we then took a look at the split between kind of tourist activity and more residential activity trips along the corridor. They're very different types of trips. Residents are more likely to kind of park, do what they need to do, go in and leave. Tourists may kind of go to dinner, engage in recreational activity, so their dwell time is typically higher. So to account for that, we estimated an approximately 25% increase in total overall dwell time for those types of trips. Kind of so just compounding. So tourists in the summer are more likely to be using parking spaces for longer durations of time. So these two factors, rather than being additive, they're multiplicative, excuse me. So we multiplied them by each other, came up with a 56% increase that we estimate would be an increase in parking demand from the winter to the summer months. Next slide, Miranda. So the maps here show the estimated occupancy percentage for each parking facility identified based on the initial parking counts that were conducted and then multiplied by that 56 or increased by that 56%. And then what you're seeing is on the left here is weekday, on the right is weekend. And as you can see, many facilities reach or surpass 60%. That's that orange color, with many surpassing even 80% and some even expected to be at or around capacity during particularly high peak areas, and that's those red colors there. And then, yep, thank you, Miranda. So kind of looking at that as well, while the utilization is high, a lot of these parking facilities are quite large and have high capacity counts, as we kind of looked at it on the first slide. So kind of what we're looking at here is while the utilization is high, there are still some parking areas that do have upwards of 20 or more available parking spaces, even at peak periods. So kind of what we're seeing here is that even with that seasonality increase, there does appear to be capacity to support additional mixed-use development, which we'll go into how that kind of fed into our process a little bit later on. Next slide, Miranda. So some key takeaways we found here. So overall, the east side of Main Street exhibited higher parking occupancy than the west. That said, there are facilities on both sides of the street that may be candidates to be able to absorb additional parking demand from potential mixed-use developments, is what we're kind of showing here. Next slide, Miranda. And again, if I'm going too fast, please feel free to stop me if you have any questions. So just wanted to throw that in there as well. So again, some key takeaways for the parking component. So we identified a few, again, key takeaways. I think the overarching one is that there does appear to be capacity to absorb new demand, even with that seasonality increase, to support the residential parking demands. One item that may help alleviate some of these parking concerns is to identify and support opportunities for shared parking amongst some of these larger parcels with some of the smaller, less available parking, but higher utilization parcels. Also, improving east-west connections. I know there have been several projects on Main Street recently and ongoing to kind of improve pedestrian connections across Main Street, make it safer for non-motorists, kind of alleviate some concerns with parking on one side of the street to visit a destination on the other side. Making those connections safer may help kind of incentivize that type of behavior. And then finally, as we'll kind of discuss later, just continuing the conversations with property owners to alleviate some of the misconceptions they may have, which we'll get into when I talk about the interviews that we conducted. Any misconceptions that there may be a lack of parking, or kind of how that impacts potential for mixed use development. And then we do also note here, we're aware of the new state legislation that was recently passed regarding parking regulations. So we are going to take a look at that down the line and see how and if that would affect any of our recommendations down the line. Next slide, Miranda. So given our audience today, I'm not going to go too much into some of these regulatory overviews. I know you all are very intimately familiar with the parking and zoning regulations. So essentially, next slide, Miranda, we just wanted to highlight that we did familiarize ourselves with some of the regulations specific to mixed use development and associated parking in the study area. This did inform, as you'll hear later on, our initial site selection process, and will be considered as we kind of move through the process as a screening tool as we kind of narrow down to those top 10 sites. Next slide. And then again, this slide is particularly focused on mixed use residential in the B1 district in particular. So these regulations in this slide in particular is going to be very important as we advance towards performing test fits, just to make sure that any recommendations we're making are actually feasible within the zoning recommendations. So just wanted to highlight that we are kind of aware and incorporating the regulatory environment into our decision-making process. Next slide. And then I think this is my last one. So as part of this process, as I mentioned, in coordination with Chris in the town, we did conduct several interviews with property owners, owners who own property along the Main Street corridor. So what you're seeing here is just kind of a high-level compilation of what we had heard. We do have the detailed project notes, and that'll be part of our technical memo. So you can see those as well. But we kind of broke them down into three main categories: parking, zoning, and then just general development challenges. So essentially what we heard is that while parking is a concern, it's likely not the most major or primary barrier to mixed use development for property owners. Their considerations dealing with parking are more focused on kind of how they can take advantage of shared use agreements, and using on-street parking as a way to kind of fulfill the requirements of their parcel. So, and then as we know here, evaluating kind of the financial and regulatory aspects of shared parking. So while it was discussed, it wasn't really a primary barrier. What was more of a barrier in the minds of the property owners are kind of more practical barriers, such as access requirements, layout requirements, and how that kind of would affect the layout of any mixed use development. And I think as we spoke with them about some of the regulations, that those concerns kind of abated a little bit. And I think ongoing communication with the property owners about the regulations and how they can kind of take advantage of the considerations you all built into the zoning standard will be important moving forward. And then finally, at the end here, some of the most major considerations for the owners themselves was the financial viability of actually constructing and renting out the residential components of a mixed use development. That was a major concern, how they can make it financially feasible for themselves, and kind of alleviating some of the misconceptions about what appropriate rents are. I know there was one owner in particular who was surprised by what some of the rents were in the northern end of the corridor. So kind of communicating those types of things. And then the major item that we did here, which we will again get into a little bit later, is septic capacity was the kind of the primary barrier that was identified towards mixed use development. There was a lot of concern over whether there was capacity within the septic system to support mixed use development. And like I said, we'll kind of go into this a little bit later. Finally, just some other kind of key factors that were mentioned included structural stability. So can the buildings actually handle second floor residential on top of commercial spaces? Is there market demand for residential in this area? How will it affect existing relations with commercial tenants? Are uses compatible? One person was discussing how he didn't view residential over a restaurant, for example, as a compatible use, and then just other regulatory and incentive flexibility. So just kind of being an open communication with property owners about those types of things. So happy to answer any questions, but if not, I can pass it back to Miranda to talk about how this process kind of informed our initial screening. So, thank you.
Any questions?
I just wanted just to clarify, in the analysis, all the parking at the train station is out of scope for what you looked at, is that right? Okay.
Yes.
Lots of more parking that could be available for some of these shared possibly, but I know it's not in scope for the study here.
And I think we did look at initially, I think it was outside of kind of the radius for the parcels we were looking at. It was a little bit too far to kind of meet the parking requirements.
Yeah, for most of them, makes sense, but okay.
Yeah, that would have been great if, that's
Overnight parking at the train station either, that might.
That's other problems, yeah. So they're really big part, that's what I confirmed they were not.
Anyone else? Anyone online? No, if you want to serve the panelists, if any, raise your hand if you're a panelist. I think we're all set to move on.
Thanks.
Great. To the second part, as the transition, just and kind of related to the question about the study area, the purpose of the study we're trying to identify is the best opportunity to increase housing supply. That's why, the study area is defined in that way, and also that this priority sets defined as the highest potential sites. I just want to add a disclaimer here that, we have a ranking or screening system that I will dive into the details, but this is a process we are trying to compare the potential among the parcels. If the parcel is not selected in our result, does not mean doesn't have the potential to add housing. It just means it's not in the first top group with highest potential. There's the potential compared to at least 10 sites in this district is relatively lower. Okay. So with that, we developed the slides trying to show, hopefully this is kind of a screening process, screening framework. From the top gray bar, what we studied screening sample is all the 155 parcels within the study area. And we developed methodology through this 4 steps screening with the goal to identify the top 10 properties with the highest potential. And I will dive into each of the steps in the next few slides. But as an overview, these steps are designed as from more data-driven, more objective from the early steps. And when we have a narrow down to a smaller group of the parcels, we will be taking a deeper look at the specific conditions, site and building conditions for adding like second story, things like that. So the 4 steps, starting from the parking utilization, what are the parcels with relatively lower parking utilization that if they are already almost full in the current condition, they are screened out. And the second is the suitability for mixed-use apartments, that sometimes it's the current use parcels are too small, or the geometry or connectivity is not that great and not really possible to add apartments. And then the step 3 is the septic capacity. As we learned, septic capacity has been a big concern and barrier. So that Brian will share more on the details. Basically, we're looking at on the remaining site, how is the septic capacity? Is there additional capacity that could support additional housing units? If it's possible, and how many bedrooms or units is possibly could support? And then we will work with Brian also on what's the possible layout or sizing of the septic system when we develop the test pit. And then the last step after that, we will be looking at the building conditions. Some of the property may be best suited for adding a second floor units on the existing buildings versus some larger parcel might be possible to add a new building on the existing surface parking lot or the non-building area. So on the first step of the parking utilization, our criteria basically is to exclude the sites with already more than 80% utilization based on the analysis that Greg just explained. There are some consideration to explain. First, that is we have the data or analysis result of both the weekday and weekend day utilization, and we are picking the higher of the two as the criteria, as the data for each parcel to compare. And second, although some specific parcel may over 80% utilization, however, if the adjacent parcel has much lower utilization, there is a potential to share or combine, then that site will still remain for further review. And after this kind of initial screening for 80% utilization, out of the 155 parcels, we have about 88 parcels remain. We use just another thing is like the properties versus the parcels. To explain, we will give you an example that a property may include the multiple parcels in like the parcel boundary. So for example, this location, we have a surface parking lot location as shown highlighted in yellow. We have the parking utilization here, but this parking lot is actually shared by 3 parcels. So this is 1 property and 3 parcels. And in this case, in the legend, you can see that the weekend utilization is about 35, but the weekday utilization about 87. And so in this case, this parcel is screened out, is excluded by the step 1. And then for step 2, the suitability from the GIS data we have, and also this is the methodology that there are 2 notes. First, we kind of excluded the parcels with less than 4 availability in the parking number. This is related to the minimum required, or the ideally for each new dwelling unit we might have 2 additional parking available, and then some of the parcel, even the utilization may not be that high. It could be just a 4 parcel and only have 1 additional availability. So that's 75%. Those small parcel with very limited by number parking spots available is also ruled out. And second is we did a preliminary desktop review to see these parcels in terms of the size, geometry, and other constraints. And with that, we exclude the sites with substantial limitations. And from this step, about 22 parcels were ruled out of the 88 parcels. And then that is what we have right now on the screen. On the left is the number of the 20 properties, and the 66 parcels remain. And keep in mind that we are trying to identify the top 10 of this 20. So we will try to screen out about half of it. And the white bold line is outlining the parcel lines. So some of the parcel is combined of multiple parcel, like property number 10 is 3 parcels versus number 17, including a bunch of small parcel boundaries inside. And the map on the right, for the color coding is the utilization of the highest utilization of the either weekday or weekend day, and anything in red would be above 80% is already we already take them out of the map, except remember the step 2, we have a consideration that if the red parcel has adjacent parcel with additional access to capacity, then that was to be remain in consideration. And the number on each of these parcels, for example, 57, as noted here, is the total parking capacity at this property. So, for example, this one, we have 57 total capacity at about 60 to 80 utilization at the highest based on our analysis. Excuse me. And that's the 20 parcel we have. Sorry, 20 property and 60 parcel we left. And the next step, we will review all of these 20 properties for the safety capacity analysis. Excuse me. Sorry. Actually, this is a good time I can pass to. And I'll get some water and back to after breath.
Okay, thank you, Miranda. We're looking at as Miranda explained, this is narrowed down to around 20 areas that have the greatest potential in terms of excess or available parking capacity that you could accommodate residential units. So what we're doing is going through an evaluation of those parcels and trying to, on a tabletop basis, we're not doing soil testing or anything like that. We're using existing information. We're trying to look at what potential bedroom capacity or septic system capacity these parcels might have. We have a number of slides here I'd like to go through, but before I do that, the Chris's staff put together a tremendous amount of information on all these parcels, a huge spreadsheet, and also actual site plans that are on file with the town that we could utilize to see what areas might be available on the parcels, where the buildings are, where utilities are, what areas might be open for a septic system leach field. And we also, the health district has pulled, they have a lot more detailed file information includes soil testing, depth to groundwater. So they've pulled out numerous files we're going through next week to go through individual parcels to get site-specific data. In terms of septic systems, the current health code regulates up to 7,500 gallons a day through the local and state health department. Recently, the legislature increased that capacity up to 10,000 gallons a day. Those regulations are not in effect yet. They're formulating those new regulations to address the higher flow capacity between 7,500 up to 10,000 gallons a day. So currently, you're looking at 7,500 gallons a day. That equates to 50 bedrooms, which is quite a few bedrooms. The 10,000 gallon a day would go up to 66 bedrooms, would equal 10,000 gallons a day. In terms of regulatory agency jurisdiction, when you get beyond 7,500 gallons a day, you're dealing with the state DEP, which has a much more rigorous and involved analysis required for system design. It requires generally a greater separation to groundwater because they have you calculate mounding of groundwater. In particular, they look at generally larger setbacks to property lines for the renovation of wastewater. And a big factor is having to look at nitrogen impacts on groundwater. Oftentimes it leads to having to an on-site treatment system, like some of the facilities you have in town. They have a treatment plant to remove nitrogen. Currently, the health code doesn't get into that. They may get into it when they go up to 10,000 gallons a day, but currently they don't get into that. So we're focusing on the health code criteria. And again, that would go up to 50 bedrooms, which is, quite a few bedrooms in terms of adding on to a parcel. The main factors affecting septic system capacity are the soil drainage characteristics, whether they have slow or fast seepage rates. That would be reflected in a percolation rate, for example, on a health code design. The physical area available on a site, you need a certain amount of square feet to accommodate a leach field system. So obviously a large site with open areas has a lot more potential capacity than a very, like an 1/8 acre lot with a very limited area. And then depth to groundwater is a major factor, because if you are over 5 feet to groundwater, let me back up. If you're less than 5 feet to groundwater, the health code requires a certain linear spread of the system that has a big effect on site capacity. If it's more than 5 feet to groundwater, that does not apply. You can get a much more concentrated large system in a smaller area. And they have their criteria set up that way because basically if it's 5 feet to groundwater, your soils have a lot more hydraulic capacity as opposed to a site where it might be 2 feet to groundwater or 3 feet to groundwater. So the size of the area, the percolation rate, and the depth of groundwater are huge factors determining site capacity. This first slide, I'll go through these slides fairly quickly, but we looked at the natural resource data that's available, which is a starting point for looking at site septic system capacity. And this shows the highlighted main parcels that have greatest parking potential. They're outlined in black from the description that Miranda and Greg just provided. Those are the parcel areas that we're going to be evaluating in more detail. This particular slide shows soil types mapped by the Natural Resource Conservation Service, and also inland wetlands and tidal wetlands. The gray shaded areas off to the right there to the east, those are wetland areas. You can see it only really impacts property down at the southerly area on the east side. There's an incursion of wetlands onto one of those larger parcels here. But in general, these other parcels are not encumbered by wetland soils. We could go to the next slide, please. This is another soil-based map. It shows soil drainage characteristics, and the entire tan area reflects well-drained soils. The blue areas are poorly drained soils. Those are basically the wetland areas. So again, it shows that most of these parcels are in well-drained soil categories. Next slide. And this is another soil-based map. It's based on surficial geology, and it shows that this entire area, being as flat as it is, as you might expect, it's underlain by sand and gravel deposits that go below subgrade. So that's another positive in terms of site hydraulic capacity for septic systems. Other parts of town, you might have glacial till soils or shallow bedrock soils. This is completely different. It's really optimum conditions for septic system capacity under the health code. Next slide. This is a map of the, it's a little hard to tell on this view, but it maps the FEMA 100-year flood boundaries. We have those are crosshatched in like a light blue crosshatch. I think on a future iteration, we'll darken that up, but basically to the east there, the green is in the flood area, and adjacent to that, there's crosshatched blue areas. Those are the 100-year flood boundaries. The balance of the area is in the 500-year or higher flood zone. So again, this only impacts one of the properties to the southeasterly part of the study area. And all the other ones are generally outside of the 100-year flood boundary. There's a little piece way at the north. It touches one of the parcels up there. north up on Route 1, but in general, these other parcels are outside of the 100-year flood boundary. Next slide, please. This is the natural diversity database, areas of sensitive habitat. This would really mainly get involved if you get into any kind of state or federal funding. You're required to run any project in those areas by the DEP to see if there's any species of sensitive or critical habitat or sensitive condition. And you can see it really only impacts again, that area to the southeast there, near the wetlands. Most of the other parcels are outside of this. But again, that would really only come into play if you're involved state or federal funding for a project. Next slide, please. This is what we did is, this would be an example of how we're looking at site septic system capacity. This is a parcel at the south end of the study area. Pardon?
Porter Plaza.
Yes. It has multiple uses right now. There's a pizza parlor, there's some shops, there's an exercise building there to the bottom right. Multiple uses on the property. And this slide shows soil types and topography and wetlands. So again, this would be one of the few parcels that's impacted by wetlands and also the 100-year flood boundary. That's on a subsequent slide, but this shows the elevation of the property relative to the wetlands. And most of these parcels have a pretty good surface elevation above the wetland elevation, which would translate into good depth to groundwater. So this shows soil types and topography. Next slide, please. Again, these are a larger version of what we looked at previously. This shows the drainage of the characteristics of the soil on the site. It's all well drained except when you get near the wetland area to the northeast part of the property. Next slide, please. This shows, again, superficial geology. It shows that the site is underlain by sand and gravel soil deposits as opposed to a glacial till or bedrock type soil deposit. It's sand and gravel soil deposits at depth below the entire site. Next slide, please. This is on this particular site. It shows the green and the bluish shaded crosshatched area. That's the 100-year flood zone for the property. So obviously, you're not going to be putting any buildings within that 100-year flood boundary. And towards the west of the site, it increases in elevation quite a bit. So that's all outside of the 100-year flood boundary. So when we look at a site like this, we're focusing mainly on areas that are farther away from the wetlands for a septic system and farther away from the 100-year flood zone. Although the health code doesn't really have you restrict the septic system outside the flood zone, it's basically based on depth to groundwater in the springtime. Next slide. I think it's that's the natural diversity database area of concern that you would have to run by DEP if you're involving any kind of state or federal funding. The next slide, please. Can you blow that up in size, Miranda?
Let me try.
Zoom in on, yeah, if you can, yeah, that's good. If you can go a little further, that's great. Right there is fine. This is a site plan from the town files that shows the site development on the property. Some of these we're going to have to do a field inspection to see if there might be another building on the site that came after these plans were prepared, but this one looks to be fairly up to date. And what it shows the wetlands at up at the upper right. That's to the northeasterly part of the property. The existing buildings are shown outlined in white with a black border. We highlighted in red the existing septic systems that serve the existing buildings on the site. And what we did is we looked at basically the entire site and looked for areas that might be suitable for additional leach field and septic tank capacity. And on this particular site, we focused in on the the southwesterly part of the property, there's quite a large parking lot area and you can have systems under the parking lot. So we looked at that area in particular. There is a water line that it runs along the south boundary of the site. It goes to the exercise building there. You have to be a certain distance away from a water line, 10 feet basically with the leach field. There's a diagonal storm drain running across the site from the out to Main Street. We tried to avoid that. Although some of those things can be relocated as part of construction. There is a gas line running through to the exercise building. It runs right through the middle of that green area. That could be moved as part of construction. It's not a huge deal. You could reroute it around your leach field area. You can't have it under it or over it. You want it around it. But we looked at this area as an example, and we did a couple different scenarios with different types of leach field systems. The type of we use the commonly used leach field system nowadays is a certain particular type because it gives you a lot of square footage and site capacity or septic capacity on a square foot basis. So we looked at that particular type of system. These leach field products, depending on the vertical height of the system, it has a major impact on capacity per square foot. For example, a taller unit might be only a third the size of a system that's only a foot tall, or a system that's 2 feet tall versus a foot tall would it be like half the size of the leach field for a shallow system. So there again, the depth to groundwater is a major factor. The rectangular area in green, that would have capacity for anywhere from like 36 to 50 bedrooms in that rectangular area. And that includes both the primary and reserves septic system. You have to have a reserve capacity for any new development, change in use, like adding bedrooms or residential units. You need a primary and a reserve leach field area. So that particular rectangle could accommodate 50 bedrooms or 36 to 50 bedrooms. And there's other area on the site like that trapezoidal shaped area to the right. That's additional area that could have bedroom capacity. We cut it off at 50 because that's the health code DEP jurisdiction break point. And if you get into DEP, it's a whole different set of requirements. So, and that's quite a few 50 bedrooms is quite a few bedrooms for adding on to an existing site. So this is a type of analysis we'll be doing on these properties to try to highlight what are the 10 highest potential sites for bedroom capacity with adding a septic system leach field to the property. The buildings, obviously, if you put a new building footprint on the site, it reduces area available. If you go up vertically, it preserves area on the site. So that's a big factor in how any site might be developed, whether you're going out horizontally or vertically with additional units for residences. But this is basically an overview of how we're approaching this, and on a preliminary basis, trying to identify a range of bedroom capacity for these different parcels. And unless anybody has any questions, that's kind of the summary of where we are right now and how we're approaching this.
Is there any questions?
Yeah, I guess I would have a couple questions. If you put 50 bedrooms in there, into this piece of property that we're looking at, I know there's a bunch of different properties that make all this up, the gym and the estuary and everything else. How would you envision parking for those 50 bedrooms? Is it 2 cars for 1 bedroom? Is it 1 car for 1 bedroom? Is it a designated spot and only they could use it?
Well,
I'm just curious on how you envision it going forward.
Yeah, I think this would be one element of the analysis. We'll give Miranda and Greg the potential bedroom capacity for city sites, but then they'll look at the other aspects of the site to see, well, how many parking places could it accommodate, given the current usage? So you might have more bedroom capacity for leach fields as opposed to bedroom capacity for parking. So this is just like one criteria. And then use this to try to zero in.
This is just pinpointing your part of it.
Yes,
And
just,
then
just,
the overlay.
right, wastewater disposal standpoint, yep.
Right, and as one part, Brian has taught me that, this leach field, for example, in the green area, the parking can be reserved. But I've had some early discussion that, if we put a new building on the other half of the surface parking lot, that may not work, because then with the available parking capacity, it's not possible you take out further reduce the parking space by adding a new building and still meet the parking needs for both existing tenants or renters and future buildings. So in this case, this parcel may be the best case, is to add a second floor unit on the top of the existing two buildings, maybe make them one together. But then, we will see with the remaining parking capacity, how much at the parking lot would be available for future new units, and that will be a factor for us to determine what's the maximum available bedrooms to add.
Okay.
Any other questions? Online, in person?
You're in process of analyzing all the parcels, or you have analyzed all the
No,
parcels?
we're in the process of that, yeah, I'm,
This is just the example of how you feel about your process.
right, yeah, the health department, we have, some information from, the town hall files, planning zoning files. With the health department, they pulled, a whole stack of, we have a whole list of other properties that the town didn't have, or they have supplemental information for the ones we already have. And in particular, we're going to be looking at how deep is groundwater on these sites, because like I said, that has a huge impact, like on this one, 36, it goes up to 50, depending on how deep groundwater is. If the system's a foot taller, it goes from 36 to 50. It's a major factor there.
I think that's it for questions. I don't know, Miranda, if you want to continue.
Need to back to normal size. Yeah, so then we're gonna summarize our next steps. As Brian mentioned, that he is currently in progress to analyze all the 20 remaining properties. As the one example we showed, that one actually is the largest by acreage or square footage out of the 20. So other smaller parcels might have different challenges, and those will help us to further shortlist, narrow down to the final top 10 out of the 20 sites. Again, that is more like the highest potential compared with peers, or the most low-hanging fruit that is possible. And we will look at those 10 sites in more detail to propose potential strategy to add additional housing units, and where the parking might be resolved, where might be shared parking, and also where might be the solution or size and location wise for the septic system. And those test fit will also be accompanied by the recommendations, if sharing parking or improve accessibility is a priority, to help incentivize that to happen. And that will be happen in the March and April according to our project schedule. I think that's our last slide. Yeah, and then any questions or further comments?
I just wanted to, from like the analysis of the sites here, we're looking for the sites we could put, say, the most units on one parcel, as opposed to the best way to put the most units across the entire study area. I'm just thinking of 50 units in one building on one property versus, say, 2 units on 25 properties for the same number of like housing units, and from a town standpoint, we would get the same number, but these top 10 are the ones we could put sort of the highest density on. Is that what's gonna come out as the end?
That's a really good question. I guess, Chris, we didn't really touch on that, but yes, obviously, some are part of the parcel. It's maybe easier to add probably 1 unit or 2 units versus this parcel is possible. I'm not sure we can add 50 bedrooms, but maybe 30 bedrooms. Our goal is trying to identify 10 locations, I guess, with the highest potential. We don't really have a total target, like together we need to add 30 or 50 units.
Okay.
And again, of course, eventually where to add which parcel first, what will happen next is really in the depends on the market, and maybe some owner will have more incentive to start early, and that is not in our top 3 list. Maybe number 8 will happen, and we don't have really control on that.
So I think too, even though we prioritized these sites, it doesn't mean we haven't gathered information on the smaller ones.
Right.
I mean, just what Brian's done, the parking analysis. So if someone else was to come in, it wasn't one of these priority sites, at least we could say, well, we have preliminary information. You know, you have parking, your soils seem to be in order, and go from there. At least that way, it's easier to lead a developer versus saying, I'm not really sure, you'll have to figure that out. So there's some preliminary information. And then the other thing we're working on with this is, you know, how to amend the regulations, you know, to make this work. If we need to amend the regulations, which we most likely will.
Could you explain in the beginning, we talked about the 7,500 gallons and 10,000 gallons, what? You lost me with that, how does that affect? You made that equated to 50 units. How does that work?
Well, currently your for septic systems, you're either dealing with the state and local health department under the public health code regulations. And if it gets over 7,500 gallons a day, you're dealing with the DEP and a state discharge permit. And they have more, because the systems are larger, they have a more rigorous analysis, and they look at other pollutants and renovation of the effluent. So it's basically a different set of criteria for design.
You can understand that.
Yes.
What does the 7,500 gallons mean?
It's an arbitrary number that was picked up by the legislature. It used to be 5,000 gallons a day. Then maybe, I don't know, 8 years ago, they changed it to 7,500 gallons a day, probably through lobbyists. They wanted to go up higher because it's easier with the health code than the DEP. They don't look at as many factors. And a few years ago, they bumped it up to 10,000 gallons a day. So that's got a pretty large system. So now the health department is really grappling with updating their whole design standards to address these larger capacity systems. I think they're going to have to look at other aspects of design that they don't look at currently. Right now, you just put it 2 feet above the water table and you're good. I think maybe with these large systems, they might get into what DEP does. You have to, when you put that much water in the ground, the water table rises. So you have to keep it vertically above that water table for good treatment. So they're developing new regulations to address that larger volume capacity. Yeah.
Anyone else? Well, thank you, Miranda, and Brian, and everyone for and Greg for presenting tonight. I think we're all set. We'll see you in about a month or so for the next follow-up.
Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of work going into this.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Yeah.
So our next presenters are Sam Gold and Eliza Lopresti from River Cog. And as we are all very aware, we have another shift in the housing laws, and Our discussion is to talk about the regional housing growth plan, and rather than have an independent housing plan as we are on track for. Rivercog is here to talk about what their role and our role would be if we join in with the regional housing growth plan with Rivercog. So thank you, Sam and Eliza, for coming in tonight to fill us in. I know we're all learning a lot.
Yeah, well, it's great to join you tonight. And it was actually nice to see Miranda again present. And previous, we had a great time working with them on our Thriving Communities TOD project. So I was glad to see that they're continuing to do work for the town of Old Saybrook. Thank you for having us tonight. I will send the regrets of Megan Juflis, our deputy director and planning alternate. She was feeling a little under the weather, so I'm covering for her, and so this presentation was created with a combination of Megan and also Eliza's work, so I will give them credit for it. So Eliza, how do you want to divide this? Should I start it off and then you'll tell me where you're going to cover it, or do you start?
No, you go ahead, and I was just gonna
Okay.
talk about the housing committee stuff at the end, so you'll see that.
Okay. So, so as everyone in the room and on the Zoom should know, that back in the special session in November, the General Assembly passed Public Act 25-1, and the governor signed it a few weeks later. This landmark housing law will have significant impacts on every city and town in Connecticut, and there's a lot in here. Including zoning changes, requirements for municipal and regional housing growth plans, and then a number of optional provisions. These optional provisions typically earn a town points towards moratoriums under 830G. And then there's a number of under other items in the Public Act, including new funding streams for housing. New savings plans for people to save up money for down payments, and a number of different other provisions, some of which are optional new programs, which will take some time to fill out. I think what's important about particularly the housing growth plans is they are not due this year. The General Assembly gave us some time to work this out, and that's where I'm I'm going to go over with all of you. Many of you probably remember the 830J affordable housing plans that we worked on back in 2021, 2022. Those would be due for updates starting next year. These new housing growth plans replace that affordable housing plan 830J requirement. So we're so this new public act has moved beyond that. So I think what's important is that there's a number of deadlines that are coming up, and I think the big gist of 2026 is for OPM in consultation with the COGS to work on coming up with what we're going to do, what is the methodology the state's going to use to create state and regional housing growth targets. That work is ongoing. There's been a consultation between the COGS, other stakeholders, and OPM, that overall methodology to comprehensively look at housing needs over the next decade, that should be completed December 1st, and that is all housing regardless of price point. So this is a comprehensive look at housing. There's another assessment that is the responsibility of the COGS, and each COG is required to do a regional housing needs assessment and come up with a regional affordable housing goals for each municipality. So that regional housing needs assessment is supposed to take inputs from the state information. And the same with the municipal affordable housing goals, but it's not a direct connection. So we have a lot of flexibility in how we do our regional housing needs assessment. And we have a lot of flexibility how we come up with municipal affordable housing goals. And so I think that's it is not as top down as many of us feared, with the state giving us a number of units that we have to build. This is much more. The state is going to do analysis, and they expect that analysis to be a input, but not necessarily the determinative one. And we are required to inform the towns of the COG's regional municipal affordable housing goals for each municipality for June 1st. Our plan is to actually have that information to the towns by March or April, because under the law, we give it to you June 1st, and then by June 30th, the town has to decide whether they want to use the COG number and go with the COG, and that is an affirmative choice, or if you want to go on your own, and if you want to come up with a different number. You won't know that. You won't be able to make that decision until you have that guidance from the COG.
Yeah, and I'd just like to interject, Sam, and
Yeah,
say
sorry.
that our intention is to keep our towns really well informed of this entire process so that when we do have those numbers, it's not a surprise to anyone.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's our goal. And the same thing with the state, with the Office of Policy Management, OPM, who is the executive branch agency who is really tasked with a lot of this work. Although the deadline for those housing growth targets is December 1st, they are hoping to have that stuff available much earlier. And because the earlier they can get that out, the earlier we can start our work, and the earlier the towns can make their decisions as to how they want to proceed. And then the final component is at the end of June of 2027, municipalities either will inform the COG whether they want to go in with the COG's target number, and on a regional affordable a regional housing growth plan. Although I will point out that the core of that plan is about affordable units, although we intend to make it more comprehensive and therefore more useful to the towns. It's also, I think, very important to point out that these housing growth plans are really what the state, at least what OPM in their interpretation of the statute is that it's not about the town building any housing. It's about the town doing what it can within its powers to encourage housing development, but the town is on the hook to actually build it, because the reality is that housing production in this country is by and large privatized, and we do not expect the public sector and municipalities to be able to build this housing. Furthermore, if there's a downturn in the economy or other external factors, you can't expect much growth to happen. And I think that is OPM, who is the agency that will be overseeing this. They are well aware that that the town can do what it can do in planning and in zoning, but and potentially some other policies, but this town's abilities are limited. So I think that was good, a good acknowledgement on their part. And then the final bit is so after everyone makes their decision whether they want to go on their own or they want to go in with the regional housing growth plan, that document in RiverCog is due July 1st of 2028. So I'll go a little bit more detail in some of these elements. This is a little bit confusing, but the idea is that there's going to be the state analysis that will look at housing need over the next 10 years. And the need will be calculated based on multiple factors, but not limited to housing replacement needs, availability of affordable and deeply affordable housing, number of new household formations, population demographic changes, and measures of house cost burdening. The evaluation will inform the housing growth targets for the state and each planning region, but those targets are not they are not imposed on us. We don't actually have to adopt those exact targets. The next slide. All right. And so the COG must develop a regional housing needs assessment. RiverCog has already done this, working with our regional housing committee. And a year ago, the RiverCog board adopted that methodology for the last time we did a regional housing needs assessment. So I think we're in a good position to do this again. And using that regional housing needs assessment, we are directed to establish recommended affordable housing goal for each municipality in the planning region for the next 10 years. And the regional housing needs assessment. So regional housing needs assessment is all housing. But then we would distill that into an affordable housing goal for each town. One thing that you should be aware of is that the definition of affordable housing is slightly different than 830G. When they talk about affordable housing, they're only talking about deed-restricted properties that are restricted for 40 years. They're not talking about other categories of affordable housing that you get credit for under 830G, including subsidized mortgages or vouchers. So this is purely about deed restrictions when we're talking about affordable housing. Although, to make a more useful plan about housing, we do intend to talk more generally about other housing needs as well. And then some of the requirements in here, I'll just we have to design and due consideration of affirmatively furthering fair housing, relies on appropriate regional metrics, of need to ensure adequate housing options. We have to look at the number of households at or below 30% of area median income, with housing costs at or above 50% of their income. And we're to look at overcrowding and other cost burdening indicators using comprehensive housing affordable strategy data or similar source. But we are not limited to just these data sets. Next slide. And then the goals, in creating the goals, the statute gives us some guidance, and it uses appropriate factors for fairly allocating need among municipalities, including but not limited to proximity of housing to any current or planned public transportation project, any commercial and industrial zone in which significant employment opportunities exist, as identified by the COG, or any downtown area. Also, we are supposed to take into consideration any developable land, shared multifamily housing stock. I will mention the availability of developable land. One thing that's also required under this public act is a inventory of developable land by town, and that inventory takes into consideration a number of the environmental constraints that impede development of you may have vacant parcels for a good reason. Also, it would exclude parcels that are put to a public use, like public parks or land trust land that is conserved for that is held for conservation reasons. Once you come and then also the shared multifamily housing stock. The drafters of this law didn't want all the housing going into one municipality. They wanted it to be spread out. On top of that, we're supposed to apply an adjustment that's somewhat based on wealth, and they calculate wealth by a net grand list per capita. And so once again, they didn't want all the housing going to the poorest towns. Next slide. All right, so we have the regional housing needs assessment and municipal affordable housing goals. So once we come up with those housing goals, we submit them to the Secretary of OPM, and then we shall publish these affordable housing goals for each municipality on the COG website, including the publication of any input assumptions and data sources. And COG shall provide notice of such published goal to each such municipality. So by June 30th of 2027, the town will decide whether it wants to participate in a regional municipal housing growth plan or their own. They're very much the same document and they're approved the same way. So you're not giving up any control. This is for your annex of a regional plan to be approved. It still needs to be approved by, the approval is a little wonky. It's planning and zoning or planning, and the chief elected official. So it would be you, be the planning commission and the first selectman, who then have to approve it before that portion of the regional plan is active. We asked the question of OPM, what happens if the planning commission and the first selectman don't agree? Well, I guess in that case, you don't have a plan. The statute doesn't provide for a tiebreaker or how to solve that problem. But that aside, there's a lot of unknowns in this public act. So every municipality in Connecticut must create and adopt a municipal housing growth plan or participate in and adopt a regional housing growth plan by the initial deadline in every 5 years after. Our thinking is that since we are coming up with 10-year numbers, that your 5-year update would probably be minimal and be more of a check-in, because we're the state and the COGS are doing 10-year numbers, and I don't think we would be doing updated needs projections until the next decade. So I think the 5-year update would be a smaller lift. The decision to opt into the regional housing growth plan must be made within 30 days after the COG publishes the municipal affordable housing goals on June 1st. Of course, as we mentioned, our goal is to get it out to you as early as possible, hopefully a couple months before the deadline. Municipalities that do not opt in for the regional housing growth plan must adopt their own and must adopt an affordable housing goal prior to the submission of their municipal housing growth plan. So that affordable housing goal can be the same goal as established by the COG, or it could be different, and the town can create its own affordable housing goal. If it's different, the municipality must provide a written explanation to the COG, specifying the reasons for such difference. And this is important because ultimately your plan has to be approved by OPM or potentially this new state housing council, and they will look at that at your rationale and methodology for coming up with an affordable housing goal as part of their approval of your plan. Next slide. Municipal housing growth plan required considerations. These plans, I will give kudos to the General Assembly for this, should be consistent with the municipal POCD, regional POCD, state plan of conservation and development, and relevant plans by the local water pollution control authority. It should identify specific zones or parcels that may be developed to meet the affordable housing goal through the process of summary review and maximum allowed density for each. Summary review is a new term in a new process. It's something which is akin to by right, but you can do site plan approval. There's also a public health and safety assessment, which the idea here, it's supposed to be a by right approval that doesn't require a public hearing and doesn't require any discretionary votes, but you can still do a site plan approval process. It can be approved by your land use administrator. It can or your town planner. It could be approved by the committee vote. You're just not allowed to have a public hearing on it. And furthermore, in the summary review language, public health and safety, that is not defined. So it's very possible that you could come up with safety and public health and safety criteria, such as keeping housing out of flood zones or other areas where there might be a public health issue or safety issue. So of course, the lack of definitions and the conflicts that are created by some of these things, might have to go to the courts to get sorted out. But that's what we're dealing with. And then the last bullet here is identify strategies the municipality has or will adopt to improve accessibility of affordable housing for individuals with an intellectual or developmental disabilities. This is a very interesting relic. The bill that that was proposed back in the spring session last year was actually a bill looking at housing issues for people with intellectual or developmental disabilities. They then did a strike all amendment and then put everything in housing in that bill, but kept with this one element of looking at housing for people with special needs. So that remains in your housing growth plans. So as I said, previously said, identify strategies that you will adopt or promote. Inventory of developable land. OPM and their geographic information officer is creating data sets and tools for municipalities and COGS to use for this developable land inventory. So you won't be on your own. There will be support. Identify projected infrastructure needs, including wastewater capacity, improve implementation, and provide implementation schedule for policy strategies and action plan. I will mention that for the wastewater capacity, this public act also directs the state to do a sewer and wastewater study statewide to look at capacity issues and need issues. Of course, Old Saybrook doesn't have a system, but it'll be interesting to see as that study is done, and we don't know exactly the timing of it, when they'll complete their work, where they take that study, and will they entertain, extend a major extensions or make recommendations beyond what we can beyond studying what we can do with our existing plants versus building brand new plants. So yeah, that's yet to be seen. Next slide. So municipal housing growth plans. I thought this was an interesting element of them. Public hearing is optional. So you may have a public hearing on your municipal housing growth plan, but you're not required to. Although it does have rules if you do decide to have a public hearing, the rules that follow, which are very similar to other planning documents. The town is to submit your municipal housing growth plan to the COG for review for 90 days. We send you back comments, but the COG does not approve or deny that document, and then that document is sent to OPM for approval. They have 120 days to approve it. If they don't approve it, it then goes to this new council, the new state housing council. And I know one of the co-chairs is John Guskowski. I don't know who the other co-chair is, but they have started meeting, and they're charged with creating guidelines and being the default approver of these plans if OPM doesn't act. What we kind of gamed out is that, let's say OPM doesn't like your plan and doesn't want to approve it. If they let the 120 days expire, it then goes to this commission or council, and then they can approve it or not, I guess. And then you have to file with the town clerk, post on your website. Oh, sorry about that. And then there's annual progress reports that are submitted to OPM. Progress will be used to demonstrate progress as condition of award for housing growth program. Remember, the primary metric, the core metric here, is deed-restricted units. And so having good data regarding what affordable deed restrictions you have in town is very important. We know from another COG, they did a project helping one of their towns. I think the town of Hamden. They had some interns going through land records, and they found out they had more deed restrictions than they thought they did. So having a good inventory of what deed restrictions you have, when those deed restrictions expire, is really important, because let's say you have some deed restrictions from 25, 30, 35 years ago, they may be expiring. And of course, the statute really didn't flesh out anything like this. If towns could somehow re-up deed restrictions and preserve those deed restrictions, that counts as new affordable housing, because otherwise it wouldn't be. So there are approaches here that preservation of affordable housing can count. All right, next slide. Regional housing growth plans. So very similar to the municipal housing plan. So once again, it would be every 5 years. It would have the same elements as the town municipal housing growth plans. In addition to we have to include the housing growth policies that each municipality has or will adopt. This is actually the same as in the municipal plan. And then each municipality that opts into the regional housing growth plan shall adopt and implement the housing growth policies in the plan and submit an annual progress report. So this is very much the same stuff as in the town plan. And going back to this, we expect OPM to issue the initial guidelines for the housing growth plans on March 1st, so just in a couple weeks. And then Office of Policy Management and the Geographic Information Officer to issue developable land tools for July 1st of this year. And then OPM, Department of Health and Deep to conduct a wastewater capacity study. Is that by July 1st or starting July 1st?
It's by July 1st, but we've been told that it isn't going to happen by then because they have to do all of these other things.
Right.
So,
And I know we'd heard from the Geographic Information Officer, the head GIS mapping person at OPM, that July 1st seemed also tenuous for them. But you need the mapping of all the systems to be able to do the studies. So some of these things are sort of dependent on one another. So even though the statute has these dates, I would not be surprised if there's some slippage, unfortunately. Next slide.
sure. And this is where I'm going to
Okay.
talk about next steps. So right now, COGS are working with OPM on the state methodology. RiverCog is going to start conducting outreach with all the municipalities, which is what we're here doing tonight. The purpose of that is to provide you with an orientation, establish partnerships, and answer early questions you might have. And we're going to be using our Regional Housing Committee as the steering committee for the housing growth plan work. So the work plan for the Housing Committee is that they're going to be providing guidance and evaluating information throughout the process. The representatives for your towns are going to convey information to their municipality about that work progress, and that will utilize materials that RiverCog staff has, or if your town representative is not able to do that, or whatever the reason, Megan and I are always available to do that as well. And we're asking you, our land use commissioners, to be giving feedback and asking questions of your representative that they can then come back to the housing committee with, and we can work on that. So our goal for the year is going to be reviewing the previous work by RiverCog and updating data. So as Sam mentioned, we already did the regional housing needs assessment, which we call the RENA. So we do need to tweak it a little bit to fit the statute, but we're kind of ahead of the game with that already. So we're going to evaluate the inputs for that need determination and the goal setting consistent with the new law. And the goal is to complete our methodology for calculating the need before we receive those numbers from OPM in December. And then that way we have a methodology that is holistic and complete, and we can just pop numbers in and see what comes out. So that's really it. I'm going to stop sharing, but if anybody has questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Before we go to questions, I just want to just raise that, there's a number of other things going on with Public Act 25-1. I'm going to just quickly mention there is a provision in the Public Act that requires towns to update their zoning to allow a middle housing, which is housing of 2 to 9 units in their commercial zones and mixed use zones. RiverCog is in the process of interviewing consultants, and we hope to have a consultant on board early next month to assist all of our towns with complying with this new mandate. The new mandate is effective July 1st. We are very concerned that if towns do not update their commercial districts or mixed-use districts to include housing, that there will not be grounds for denial, because they want the housing can be approved by this new process called summary review, which is a by right process, and you're supposed to be applying standards. And I'm not exactly sure how you do a by right approval when there's no standards. So we're very concerned about that. We're hoping to get a little bit more guidance from the state, but Old Saybrook will not be on its own. We are here to help. Public Act 25-1 did provide funding to the COGS specifically for this type of work and assistance. And it is an annual amount that of 200,000 each year. So, we are serving 17 towns, but 200,000 isn't a lot when divided by 17. But we're hoping to find efficiencies to be able to provide assistance to your town planner, your commissions, and so you're not alone on this. And so I wanted to make you aware that the funding was given to the COGS. Unfortunately, there was not commensurate funding given to individual towns like there was for 830J. 830J affordable housing plans, the towns I think got 10 or 15,000 each. It wasn't a lot, but it was something if they applied for it. So we do have some funding to help this occur. So.
Oh, yeah. So that actually reminds me of one other thing that I wanted to say, and that I don't know if it was clear in those slides, but if your town chooses to go under the umbrella of the regional housing plan when you do your municipal growth plan, then we are going to do that work for you. If you choose to do your own, then you're doing your own, and you have to do the work yourself or pay a consultant yourself. And that work will include the developable land analysis, and we intend to do public engagement on the plans, even though it's not required.
And one final thing, we did reach the COGS of Connecticut did reach out to leadership and ask for a revision to some of these dates, and it didn't seem like that proposal gained any traction. So I'm not too optimistic that in this short session that they will reopen the Public Act for pushing back some of the dates. So I think the dates that we have are the dates we have.
Yeah, and I think that the housing growth plan dates are reachable and realistic for us. It's some of the other provisions that Sam is mentioning about.
Yeah. Okay, well, questions you may have. I'm sure you have lots of questions, and we can share this presentation with you.
Sam, one question is, I know there's a number of discrepancies with the language in 25-1. Have you heard anything about any changes? Maybe not the timelines, but there's language, if you have 16 or fewer units or 16 or more, but we forget about the number 16.
So, we do have a association of COGS, and our chair of our association of COGS has been communicating some of those very small but significant fixes, like what happens when you have 16 housing units. This is in regard to under this bill, if you have fewer than 16 housing units, a application cannot be denied because of a lack of off-street parking. And so let's say someone comes in with a development of 15 units, they provide no off-street parking. That cannot be the basis of a denial. In reality, that owner is going to want to sell or rent their units. So I assume they will provide parking. And then if it's more than 16 units, so say 17 units, then there's some parking maximums that are in the Public Act that the town can impose, or the developer can commission at their cost a parking study that explains, oh, we're next to the train station and there's plenty of public parking there and people will take the train, so therefore we need less. So, but at 16, it's silent because of a drafting error.
Yeah, we did find
yeah, we have an idea.
Yeah, there's another provision in the bill that says 16 or fewer. So we believe that was the intent, and that's the way it's going to be.
So they seem to be open to fixing that. There's another element of this I mentioned in the zoning that there's a discussion about lots in commercially zoned districts. Even though my reading of it seems kind of clear, land use attorney like Mike Ziska actually interpreted as being kind of, it could go multiple ways, including if you have a commercial use in an industrial zone, in an industrial park, that owner of that industrial use could then redevelop that commercial use in the industrial zone could be redeveloped for residential. So yeah, so we submitted some language to try to clarify that. But there's so many things here that
And that was the question. So you do think, I mean, we haven't seen anything yet, but I suspect it's something, I mean, even the whole summary review process, it's not very clear. And I know July 1, and I've had a few attorneys say, well, what's the town's plan? And I said, I think we need to wait till the session goes through and doing the same thing as you are, talking to different land use attorneys. They're like, let's just wait a little bit before diving in because something needs to get clarified because these are processes that were in the summary review process, the different, discrepancies in the language, and we want to do it once and we want to do it right.
Yeah.
If we're
Yeah,
going to amend the regs.
And it's a little premature for me to be talking about this, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. We interviewed one of the consultants from our RFP for the housing zoning assistance, and one of the respondents to our RFP, they had a lawyer as part of their team, and one thing that we discussed was if you have a lawyer creating, let's say, a procedure for summary review, and multiple towns in our region use that procedure, you're in a much better place legally when if you have to go to court, that multiple towns are using the same procedure. And our hope is that we could potentially get one legal opinion that the towns can rely upon. And if everyone's using the same legal opinion, the judge, this attorney was saying that the judge may, in some future hypothetical case, take this more seriously because multiple towns are using that process. So you have a summary review process that's, I think, important to have some sort of commonality across towns because that puts you in a stronger position if you ever end up in court or someone else ends up in court. And then the other thing was that the language is there's a lot of holes in the language. And so if we can come up with a common sort of we come up with a common understanding of what the language means to us, and multiple towns use that language, the logic is the same, that it's not just old Saybrook interpreting the statute this way, it's multiple towns who have been using it based on, so I think that's something that we're hopeful that we can take some of the language and then put it to be able to use it in the ways that are most beneficial to our towns. Like one thing yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And then even if there was something drafted that we could comment on, kind of using all our land use hats, that we can train to give it back to the COG Hub to some agreement. I think that's going to make more defensible, decisions if there is that. And I think that's one of the concerns, same thing as you're saying, talking to land use attorneys, who knows who's interpreting what, which way. So at least there's a regional approach, which makes sense.
Yeah. And if we can come up with one definitions or common definitions or common processes that everyone feels comfortable with across town boundaries, it puts us in a much stronger position if you're in court. And so, because unfortunately, I think a Public Act 25-1 is going to lead to court cases just because of the how vague it is and the conflicts that are in it. So, and I don't think there's a lot of appetite to do wholesale changes to the Public Act. It's going to be very small fixes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else?
A lot of good, material there. So I just want to thank you for that.
Yeah.
I guess, just make sure I'm in terms. So it sounds like from like this far, because we were working last year on like updating our affordable housing plan, where you said there's no longer a requirement to update that. That's part of these new regional or municipal plans that are next year. Is the timing?
Well, it's actually 2028.
28. Oh yeah, right, 28. So next year is
Yeah.
Is next year when we decide, or that's 27 we decide?
27 27th when you decide whether you want to go in with the region or you want to go on your own.
Okay,
And then 28 is when it's due.
gotcha.
So where we are, Sam, I know Eliza's kind of up to date. As we've been working on this, we have a housing task force. We started digging into the existing text. We are ready to start working on our affordable housing plan. Now that we're doing the municipal housing growth plan, some of it, in my opinion, doesn't make sense for us to tackle soils analysis and some of the things for a town of our size to go through. In my opinion, I mean, obviously we have to wait till March when everything's sorted out a little bit. But I was thinking and talking to the planning commission and different zoning commission members, it may make more sense for us to kind of plug away at what we're doing, not rewrite what we're doing, but kind of organize our thoughts and take what we've done so far with the affordable housing plan and kind of do a summary of findings to pass that on and help us with the region. And then as we go forward, we can participate. So it's not like we're just gonna say, oh, this has changed, let's just stop now and we'll wait until March.
I mean, that's sort of my like 20, but that's 2 years away, so if we stop now.
No, this is next March, we would.
Yeah.
We would
Right.
opt
Yeah.
in, but
I think too, there's an opportunity to do exactly that, Chris, to look at your A30J plan, see what, how far you've gotten with those goals. What goals do you want to carry forward? And then when we start the process, you will be able to kind of hit the ground running, whether you work with us or do it on your own. You'll kind of have your goals all set. And then the only piece that you'll be missing is that number, that you have to plan for, but you still need to write goals. So
Yeah,
that can be something that you work on.
and the other element that is required in here is that they want you to identify policies. They want you to identify parcels or zones. So all of that work, it would not be wasted because those are, I think you could rescope your work a little bit, see what see what is needed for under this new public act, and then rescope your work to sort of feed into that, and it will put you in a very good position come next year.
so if we continue going forward.
Yeah, I think they have.
But the summary, yeah, I think we're kind of heading that way, summarize what we have. We've got a lot of large applications coming through here, not a volume, I should say, of applications. And I'm working on kind of putting, and John Guskowski's gonna help us a little bit, just kind of put together some area of findings. And then we could talk about our action items, what we've done, where we are, and talk about some of the rate changes as well.
Yeah,
So
what
like have a line with where you are once you move
Um,
forward, with you're moving pretty quickly.
yeah, and then also you remember we have a few legislative sessions between now and when your plan is due. And legislators don't want to deal with any big controversial housing bill this year because it's election year. But there may be another bite of the apple come the next long session a year from now to revise or tweak these things. Like one item that I think is a little crazy is in these plans, we're identifying parcels that would be compatible for affordable housing developments. And those affordable housing developments, there is a requirement that you adopt zoning to facilitate them, and zoning that will allow them by right. Well, or through this summary review by right process. Well, you can identify exactly the perfect parcels in town that can accommodate affordable housing, but you have no protection from 830G. So no developer has to follow your plan. And I think that's kind of it's not an ask for this session, but it would be a reasonable ask for next session to say, we've identified the best places in town where affordable housing works best. Maybe if you adopt you adopt the zoning, you follow this public act, that you have some protection from 830G application that's not in one of those places.
I hope that makes sense in it. It's gonna be hard for towns like ours to go through the soils analysis. And we can put flood zones and remove the undevelopable land, but when it comes to soils, we're not gonna be able to go parcel by parcel.
Right.
We would have to do something kind of like what we've
Yeah.
done with Brian in the previous study, I would assume, in order for it to be eligible. So it's gonna be tricky.
Yeah, I understand, like, what is that level of detail you have to get to for developable?
And,
Actually doing site analysis or just how like the soil assumptions.
Well, typically, in my experience, and Sam and Eliza jump in, when we do a developable land analysis, we did this for the incentive housing zone. We found an area, we have to remove, we map it to remove floodplain soils, we remove, just kind of like what Brian did. I know areas where there's wetlands, the soils are not suitable and so forth. I mean, it's a pretty in-depth process.
anywhere there's ledge, a number of different things are, and the statute, and there is a portion of the Public Act that sort of enumerates some of the things, and it's a good list. And having gone through analysis like this in the past, on the shoreline, there's not a lot of land that's actually, but it's not limited to just undeveloped parcels. It could be recommendations for greater density in developed parcels. Of course, those parcels are probably privately owned, and the owner, it's completely their discretion whether they care to even look at this. But looking at areas that could support higher density is also part of that analysis. And it could be currently developed with, let's say, a single family house, but it could accommodate something more dense.
But so you were saying that, but like, if the requirement is to implement zoning, so if we say that, hey, this business district can now allow housing, that meets the requirements here, but it doesn't force developers to do anything, right?
Right.
So like when we did incentive housing, we zoned one large area and we removed all the undevelopable land, came up with the developable. The only thing we didn't do was the soils analysis. But we took into consideration parcels that it could be your house, it could be someone's business, it could be something ripe or not ripe for redevelopment. I mean, we're never gonna get it to a perfect science where we're out of land, we're out of flat land with good soils, with no wetlands. It's not in a floodplain, we don't have that. So we're really in a redevelopment or in second story is kind of what we're doing for the B1 study.
But in some ways, I think there could be some opportunities here, because if we look at, the plan and like where we want it, we can set up the zoning to maybe make it more attractive for future developers, but it's not wholesale, like, tearing things down and like, we're not developing the town, we're just saying, hey, here's where we want these things, and hopefully if it's more attractive and it's more the summary, that might incentivize developers to go build those things where we want them. It still wouldn't penalize anybody for not doing anything with their property.
Go ahead. I just want to say, like, with opening up commercial land for residential development, there's no minimum or maximum density that you shall allow. So you could still allow, like, a very, a 1 acre per unit, and make it sort of financially less interesting to develop it as residential and keep it in commercial use. Because it's not well defined, there are things you can do to sort of try to encourage commercial parcels to stay commercial, because towns need commerce.
And I was just going to say some of the constraints that you're discussing. We, write them into the plan. The state wants to know. It sounds like from our discussions with them, they really are like looking for information as to, okay, these towns can't develop for real. Like, you're not trying to say, oh no, we can't put housing, and why not? So they want that information from our towns. So we need to include those things in the plans.
Yeah, and OPM is not looking to be the enforcer enemy here. I think they were caught off guard as much as the cogs in the towns in some ways, and I think they are just looking for towns to do what they can. With the head of the Office of Responsible Growth is Rebecca Auger. You may know her from her past career at Milo McBroom. She's incredibly experienced land use planner, and she knows the realities in town. She worked in Glastonbury. She knows what's possible and what isn't. And I think the gist here is that if you do a good job, explain your impediments, show what you can do, show what you can't do, I think you'll be fine. And because I don't, there isn't an intent on OPM to play gotcha here.
No, I think the town overall, we've done a good job at promoting housing. I mean, and an example is the presentation before our study. I mean, the zoning commission put in those mixed use regulations over 5 years ago. And in some of those interviews, it was, I didn't know rents were so high. Why would I want to do this? The cost of construction, I mean, it's not just that we have a limited amount of land. It's the cost. One of the landlords said, well, why would I want to put residential here? Because then I'm going to have an issue with people, with smells from the restaurant and people not finding, you have to have that interaction of uses too. So there's a lot more to it that, we could have the whole study area in the previous discussion be perfect, buildable, flat land with no constraints. It's also, the money and the buy-in from these property owners. So.
Right.
Sure. And I think in our region, discounting Middletown because they're a little bit different. Old Saybrook is the town that really has been able to invite in as much housing more than any of our other towns. So I applaud all your efforts on that.
Thank you.
And we're still discovering things. We're still learning things about this public act. Even while the General Assembly is debating discussing new statutes that would change the public act. So that's a whole nother thing. But like today, I learned for the first time an element that was missed was that this whole having to allow housing in a commercial district, you have to allow this middle housing, which is 2 to 9 units, or you can allow mixed use development. Mixed use development is not defined. So mixed use development could mean first floor retail, second floor, third floor apartments. And since it's not defined what constitutes mixed use, the town could set its own standard of what mixed use is. So you could potentially identify, let's say, Main Street as a place where housing will be allowed, but only on second floors. And that way you can keep your first floor retail as a retail strip for shopping or restaurants. And so there could be ways of using this to maintain it, to add to what you have, not necessarily destroy it.
That's what we have on the Main Street is we just don't allow it in all commercial districts currently.
So we have,
I guess was that one of the things you said, Sam, is that allowing it in all of them is a requirement, or that's one of the things that might be?
Oh, no. So by July 1st, you have to require either this new by right process called summary review, 2 to 9 units of residential housing in any commercial district or any mixed use district. But the way it's written, it's this, and that 2 to 9 units is called transit community middle housing. But there's no need for that, has nothing to do with transit. So ignore that part. So it's middle housing, but or you can do mixed use, and mixed use in statutes defined as a single structure that has more than one use. So could have that has retail and residential. So, and because mixed use is not defined, you could define that in your regulations to say mixed use is first floor retail, which could be office, restaurant, store, whatever. And then
we have that, so I think we already met it, so then it really doesn't apply, and just talking about it with our attorney, and other attorneys, everybody was like, well, just kind of put the brakes on because we don't know where this is gonna go, and maybe we already kind of satisfied it for now.
And
keep doing what we're doing for this review. and then see what happens with the changes and plug away at our
Yeah.
housing plans.
So, so that was something that was brought up by these consultants that we've been interviewing, was that we may find stuff that exists in the town zoning regulations that may already meet this. And so the lift in some places, like in Old Saybrook, where you already may allow second floor apartments, you might already meet this. You might have to come up with a summary review process, but at least for the zoning, it might be good in some of your zoning districts. So,
But if the region comes up with the summary review process and we all agree, it's kind of foolish for us to come up
yeah,
with
yeah,
our own.
there's strength in numbers. There's definitely strength in numbers.
So when do you think the next time we'll be coordinating on this will be? I know we're gonna coordinate anyway through the office and other projects.
Are you asking about the housing growth plans or other elements?
Plan. I know we have other plans going on, just to.
So I think the next time that we'll be in touch will be after OPM releases their their initial guidance on housing growth plans on March 1st.
Okay. Probably over the.
So I assume you'll be hearing us within a week of their release, because we'll probably have a meeting with OPM. We'll probably discuss internally with internally with staff at RiverCog. We may have a discussion across all the cogs to make sure we all understand it the same, because that has been a real issue, is that the New Haven cog doesn't want to do things differently than RiverCog, because they feel they might be put into an uncomfortable position if they so there's a desire to try to do things in a similar way, so it's not so no one is sort of out on their own.
And I will say to that end, we have started a Connecticut COG working group on the subject of housing, which has been really cool. It's been a couple people from each of the COGs working together. So that's been something great to come out of this. And there was one other thing I wanted to say. Oh, I was going to say anybody that wants to can attend our housing committee meetings. We're really focusing on this. We meet the fourth Tuesday of the month at 2:00 virtually. And Chris can certainly distribute agendas, or I send them to the town clerks. So that should be, I don't know what the town clerks do with them, but it should be somewhere where you can look on our website also, or contact me.
Right now, we have a representative from planning and a representative of zoning who's agreed to kind of attend and report back, but I think it also makes sense for planning and zoning to talk, so we're on the same page. We're not going one way with a regulation and a plan the other way. We really need to coordinate as separate P and Z, as well as with.
And the important part here is, unlike the POCD, you're required to implement these plans in your zoning. The Public Act is pretty clear. Whereas you should be implementing your POCD in your zoning. Here they're really directing you to, once the housing growth plan is complete and you identify where housing should go, that the zoning be updated to allow for it.
Great. Any other questions? Anybody online?
Great. Well, it's been a pleasure meeting with you this evening, and wish us all luck as we go into the future into the unknown.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Very informative. Thank you for all your
Thank
help.
you.
Thank you.
Night.
Good night.
Good night.
Chris, who are the planning and zoning reps?
Dennis, right here. No, who's our planning?
Wetlands.
Your wetlands, who's planning? Or we don't have a planning rep.
They're gonna be me.
We don't have a planning rep. Brenda Dyson volunteered from zoning. I try to kind of pop in here and there, and listen in the background. I just have a lot of meetings.
Nick and Kathy.
Right, and then I think Nick was, let me look, I thought someone else volunteered. So we need a volunteer from planning. I thought we did. Sorry, Dennis.
And is there a separate regional housing plan rep? Is that Megan?
we have our regional reps, but I had asked if we could get one member from planning and zoning go to attend the regional housing meetings. Not as the regional, as a rep, just to kind of keep an eye on this and report back to our commissions.
But is there a separate regional housing plan rep?
Yeah, do we have like an official, like for the regional?
That's
planning
been
commission?
meeting in the past.
That's our regional rep. This is, what,
Well, who is that? I'm sorry, you?
no, our regional, it's, who's our RPA rep? Mike, you're,
Well, good, man.
Yeah, Mike
You would-
and I are on the
Right.
regional planning committee, but I didn't think we were on the regional.
no, no, you're not.
Different committee.
So it's a different committee, so
Okay.
You want that
to,
one?
to keep the commissions in the loop, Nick and Kathy sat in on the
Yeah.
last one. And then I,
But they weren't like official members of it, they were just attending, is that?
and reporting back to the boards and
Yeah, yeah.
commissions. So kind of how planning, Dennis is on wetlands, our sea level rise
So,
liaison. So Brenda is attending on behalf of zoning, and I think it makes sense for both commissions to have someone reporting back, because
Yeah. Especially at least for the next couple of years.
Yeah.
We got it.
I agree. So we need someone from.
Yeah.
Plan.
Anybody interested?
So I think that's it.
Anything else on the
Somebody needs to make a
agenda?
motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Second is by Mike. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained, passes.